play games beginning on September 21st. So here we are, thrilled for our athletes, for our coaches, for our parents, and for our community. I know athletics in schools has been a hot topic, especially recently in the last few days. And people tend to feel strongly one way or the other, whether they're on the side of we shouldn't be playing sports or they're on the side of we should be playing sports. But nevertheless, I'm confident that we can do this safely. I'm confident in our plan, which we'll talk about tonight. I'm encouraged, for a number of reasons. The infection rate in New York State and the capital region has been very low. Our governor has cleared the way for low and moderate risk sports. NISFA has followed and has cleared the way for low and moderate risk sports. High school sports is being played in other states. Professional sports are being played. Gyms have reopened. Schools have now reopened. So I'm encouraged by all of those things, just to name a few. And I know since I've been here starting July 1, I've had several conversations with our coaching staff at Guilderland. And it's been encouraging hearing them tell me about the success that they've had running their camps, at the town or somewhere else in the community, and just the safety measures that they were able to put in place, and how well that worked. So I'm encouraged. I'm excited. Make no mistake about it. This is going to be a fall season like no other. Practice and game schedules will look different. Everyone's going to have to follow strict guidelines. And we're going to talk about those guidelines tonight. As I transition, I'm going to share a PowerPoint slide with us. So bear with me. Kate, can you confirm that this is on the screen?
Yep, looks good.
All right, awesome. So we'll start with just a quick update. As I shared with you, obviously, Guilderland has agreed to allow low and moderate risk sports to begin on Monday, which includes boys and girls soccer, boys and girls cross country, girls tennis, girls swimming, golf. I hope I'm not missing any. I probably am. Field hockey are low and moderate risk sports. And I just want to provide you an update so we all know where our counterparts are. The Suburban Council, majority of the Suburban Council has also green lighted low and moderate risk sports. The list is right there. So offering low and moderate risk sports this season will be Averill Park, Burnt Hills, CBA, Colony, Columbia, Niskayuna, Saratoga, Shaker, Shenendehowa, Troy, and Albany and Schenectady, who are going to be varsity only. And there are two schools that are offering only low-risk sports at this time, and that is Bethlehem and Ballston Spa. And I'm sure if you've caught any of the news, you may have heard that there are other leagues in our section that have decided against offering low and moderate risk sports because as the governor laid the guidelines, it is up to individual school districts. But having said that, there are other leagues outside of the Suburban Council that are going forward as well. The Colonial Council and the Patroon Conference are going forward. Additionally, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association announced last week that fall high-risk sports have been moved to March 1st, 2021. And those sports include football, boys and girls volleyball, and game day cheer. So certainly a little bit of a bummer for those sports. There's no doubt about it, but I'm encouraged that NISFA has not eliminated the option for those athletes, but rather have moved it to March 1st, which, hopefully things go smoothly here in the fall, and we're playing a winter season followed by a fall 2 season and a spring season. So as I said, Guilderland is offering low and moderate risk sports. We are offering it for kids in grades 7 through 12. So we are offering at the varsity level, JV level, and at the modified level. There is no Mod 9 or freshman soccer just for fall 2020. Those levels will return next year, but we are just offering varsity, JV, and modified. And as I showed earlier, the Suburban Council, most of the schools are going forward low and moderate risk sports. So the Suburban Council has created game schedules for varsity and JV teams. They have not created game schedules for our modified teams for the reason that only a select few number of schools in the Suburban Council have agreed to go forward with modified sports. Guilderland is one of those. Now, that doesn't mean modified athletes aren't going to get competitions this fall. It just means that the modified sports season is going to look different. And I think, when we had this conversation, the task is tall, that's in front of us to put on sports shortly after reopening schools. And with all of the strict guidelines that we have, there's no doubt about it that the task is tall. And there's logistical concerns that make that task even taller. From our end of school day being 4:30, which is the latest end of school day out of anybody in the Suburban Council, to concerns about transportation. Obviously, we're doing a staggered start across all districts. So we're taxed right now with our transportation. So it's a tall task. So a lot of the schools in the Suburban Council, to make that task a little bit more manageable, decided to do away with modified sports, but we wanted the opportunity to be there for 7th graders through 12th graders. But as I said, it's going to look different, and the way we are planning our modified sports season for our 7th and 8th graders, we're going to kind of try to provide them with skill sessions, with, player development type sessions, so that they can participate with their friends. But another thing that makes this challenging is that 7th graders at Farnsworth and 8th graders are at the high school. So our plan is going to be for modified cross country. We have a boys coach and a girls coach. So one of our coaches is going to be at the high school and will coach the 8th graders during the week, while our other coach is at Farnsworth coaching the 7th graders. The 7th and 8th graders will come together during our competitions. And like I said, we don't have those scheduled yet, but we are working on those. We have some really good ideas. But for now, we are separating 7th and 8th grade for cross country. For soccer, we don't have 2 coaches for the boys and 2 coaches for the girls. We only have 1 for each. So that's going to look a little different. I know starting next week, our modified boys soccer coach is going to be at the high school working with the 8th graders on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And at that same time, our modified girls soccer coach is going to work with the 7th graders at Farnsworth on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This will cut down the number of kids that are on campus after school. And then on Thursday, Friday, they're going to flip. So our boys coach is going to go down to Farnsworth and work with the 7th graders. And our girls coach is going to come up to the high school and work with the 8th graders. And the following week, we're going to flip that schedule so that, we have an equitable situation for 7th and 8th graders. So in a nutshell, that's the plan for modified boys and girls soccer. For modified field hockey, we are starting them on Wednesday, and they are going to practice at Aframs. So that's our modified levels. We're excited to still offer that opportunity to stay involved in athletics, but certainly due to the low number of teams available to schedule, it's going to look different. And we decided to take more of a skill session approach, and get our kids involved. And we are going to provide them with a competitive experience, but it's going to be it may be 3-4 games as opposed to maybe their normal load of 8 games to 10 games on their schedule. So stay tuned on the modified sports, but I did want to share that is our plan. And it's obviously still being tweaked, as we head into next week. So as I mentioned earlier, the fall sports teams are under a microscope. There's no doubt about it. And, the pressure's on for us to make this work. And not just, for our health and safety, but for our ability to continue to have sports for the remainder of the school year. So we have no choice, in my eyes, but to follow strict rules and guidelines. We've spent some time with our coaches at coaches meetings and one-on-one meetings talking about this guidance and what it looks like, overall, and then what it looks like sports specific and what we can do for each sport specifically, what we could do differently to make it safer for our athletes, for our coaches, and for our spectators. So here are just some of the things that, we will talk to you tonight about, and our coaches will talk to our athletes about. First and foremost, we are going to physically distance ourselves when we can, as much as we can. And certainly in a practice standpoint, that's a more controlled environment. So our coaches are certainly going to have more of an ability to do that on practice days. And we're going to distance each other 6 feet or more in our practices when we can. And masks, that's a hot topic. There's no doubt about it. And as I said earlier, people tend to feel strongly one way or the other. about whether or not we should be playing sports. It's no different for masks. But I do think, as I said earlier, the pressure's on the fall athletes for a variety of reasons. We're under a microscope, and we need to make this work. And I think in order to make it work, we really have to be strict on our rules and guidelines, and especially when it comes to masks. This is an area we have to be able to strictly enforce it. We have to eliminate gray area, because if there's gray area, it's going to make it difficult to enforce, and we may be putting ourselves in more harm's way. So we're going to be masked up, at all times. And here's how I'll break it down. At practices, like I said, when we have an opportunity to physically distance ourselves, our coaches will have the discretion to give our athletes mask breaks. And on our way out to practices, we'll be masked up. On our way out of practices, we'll be masked up. On our way to the buses, we'll be masked up. On the buses, we'll be masked up. And then we shift to games, and this is a hot topic. There's no doubt about it. But our stance is we're going to mask up, unless we have athletes who cannot medically tolerate wearing a mask during activity. And I'll go more into detail that later, but basically how that's going to work is if we have an athlete that cannot medically tolerate wearing a mask during activity, they're going to have to provide our nurse with a medical excuse stating that, and it's going to have to be signed by a doctor. And then that note is going to be forwarded to our school physician, who has to approve that. So when you are showing up to a game, if someone's not wearing a mask, it's because they have that medical documentation that they can't wear a mask. But everyone else will wear a mask, and I know what that means. I know what that looks like, and and we've had conversations with our coaches about it. And I'm one, when I was on the meeting about this when the league met, I was the one that said, are we really at a point where we're going to be requiring masks of our soccer players or field hockey players during competition, or cross country runners during a race? And as we talk about it more, if we allow athletes to do self-regulated mask breaks during competition when they are 6 feet or more, we're putting it in the hands of the athlete, and it's a very large gray area. And so when you start talking about sports such as cross country, and if an athlete says, I think I'm good, I'm going to take my mask off, how are they going to know that somebody's not behind them and about to pass them, breathing heavily and sweating and all of that stuff? They're not. So that makes it very difficult. And same for a soccer and field hockey player. They could be on one side of the field and feel like they're spread out and spaced out, and all of a sudden the ball switches sides of the field, and it's difficult. And it's tough for us to put our athletes in the position to say, all right, you're in charge of figuring out what 6 to 12 feet is. So that's a little bit in a nutshell about where we stand with masks, but it's going to look, here's how it's going to look. There are sports that are certainly more physically distant than others. For instance, singles tennis, where you've got competitors on opposite side of the net, and are 6 to 12 feet apart from each other at all times, unless they're changing sides of the court. So for singles tennis, it may be masked up until they get to the court, where they can take their mask off. For doubles tennis, we don't have that ability. So for doubles tennis, we're going to have our tennis players masked up at all times. Golf is a sport that does lend itself to be one of those sports that provides a lot of physical distancing. So our golfers are going to probably be masked up when they get to the golf course and they're on the putting green up until they get off the first tee. And then when they're distanced, they can take their masks off unless they are coming in close encounter with someone else as they get to the green or the next tee box. But soccer, field hockey, and cross country, as I mentioned, I don't know. We certainly can't guarantee physical distancing at all times during competition. So our stance right now is masks up unless students cannot medically tolerate it. And how we're coaching our athletes, we're going to coach them to say, we're going to tell them it's not mask up at all times. And if you're having a difficult time, there's no room for you to take that mask off. We're going to coach them up. And if you're having a difficult time in a soccer and field hockey game, wave to the coach, take a knee, and we'll get you out of the game, and we'll have you spaced out on our bench area where you can safely take the mask off and get a breather. A cross-country runner, we're going to coach them, if you're having a difficult time, stop running, and remove yourself from the course, 12 feet away from the course. take your mask off, regain yourself before putting your mask back on and getting back on the race. So that's where we stand on masks. It's a hot topic, but I go back to, we need to do this. We need to do this safely, and we need to be strict about our guidelines. Screening, and I don't mean to rush through the mask. I think we'll get to some of that, maybe some questions at the end, but screening, we are going to be screening our athletes before practices. And what that looks like is, we'll have several clipboards, we'll put our athletes in cohorts and make sure they're spaced out. But before they enter the playing field, for contact tracing purposes, they're going to mark that they're here, and then they're going to answer a few short questions, yes or no. And that's going to be our method of screening our athletes for practices and for games. And if our athletes answer no to any of those questions, or yes to any of those questions, our coaches are checking that chart, and we're going to remove that athlete from the playing field and ask that they go home. And really beforehand, we're going to ask our athletes, if they're not feeling well, don't show up. And it's going to be so important that we all pull together, and we're all in this together, and we're all doing our part. And athletes and spectators, if you're not feeling well, please don't come. Please don't show up. But that's our method for screening, and we're going to really do the same thing for spectators. I think a QR code is a great idea, but we may have a combination of maybe a QR code and sign-in sheets with our chaperones. But I just envision some people having a difficult time maybe with connection or not used to having a QR code. So we're going to provide both. That's how we're going to do our screening, which will provide us with information in case, not only from a screening standpoint, but in case we need to contact trace. Transportation, when I say we're going to all have to pitch in to make this work, transportation especially, because we're going to follow the same guidelines that we have during the school day, and that is we're capping occupancy to 20 on a school bus. And I understand that we have some teams that are well over 20 numbers-wise on the roster. So this year is going to be a year that we are going to lean on our parents. Like we've always leaned on our parents, but we're going to lean on our parents more so than ever. And it's specifically in regards to transportation. And, we are going to allow our athletes to sign a season-long waiver to be transported to away games with a parent, with the hopes that this will help our transportation issues, and this will help the number on our bus. And we are even going to allow parents to sign off, season-long waiver, sign off on allowing their son or daughter to attend an away game with another parent. If they cannot make that particular game, that's going to be an option. And it's an option. I want to stress option because we will have the option of the school bus. But if we have a cross-country team that is encroaching 100 athletes, with 20 on a bus, I'm sure you can figure out we can't provide that many buses. So we're going to need to lean on our parents, and we will provide that option. But it is an option. We will have a bus to all of our away games, and if we don't, may have to look at rescheduling that game so that we can get a bus. But we're certainly going to lean on our parents more so than ever. And spectators, we are following Department of Health guidelines, which is 2 spectators per athlete. So each of our athletes are going to be given spectator badges before our first game, and they're going to hand those badges out as they see fit. So if mom and dad can't make a game, they can give that spectator badge out to a brother, sister, grandmother, grandfather, etc. But as spectators arrive to our campus for games, and even off campus for games, they are going to have to be displaying that badge. That is their ticket to get in. And our chaperones are going to be looking for that, and they are going to be turning people away if they don't have spectator badges. So this is some of the guidance that we're going to have to be strict about. And I know with regards to spectators, we're still working through some things. Swimming is an indoor sport. So when it comes to spectators for that sport, it's an entirely different animal when you're indoors. So for that reason, the Suburban Council has adopted a rule for this season, unfortunately, that spectators are not going to be permitted at swimming, home or away. Now, I know I spoke to our swimming coach yesterday. We do have positions that need to be filled when we talk about managing a meet with regards to timers and scorers. So I think for our home meets, we are going to come up with a rotation for our swimming parents. So if you would like to be able to be in the pool, it will have to be in the form of, a timer or score, and we will be fair about those rotations. But, being that we're indoors and we have certain occupancy restrictions when we're indoors, we had to take a stance there, and that's league-wide. We are also working with for cross country, we're working with the Towasenta Park. I'm sure you guys have heard that town parks may have restrictions of 50 or less. So we may or may not be able to host spectators for cross country meets. Stay tuned. I'll be meeting with the officials over at Towasenta to come up with a plan. I can already tell you that if we are visiting Albany High School, they have already taken a school-wide stance that no spectators at Albany High School. So we'll make sure our coaches are communicating that information out. But that's just some of the rules and guidelines that we're really going to have to abide by, this fall to make this work. As I go through this presentation, I want to hit on another couple items so that our athletes are ready to go next week. And we need to make sure our athletes are approved to play by our nurse. They have to have completed the sports registration process, which includes the emergency contact form, the health history update, which cannot be completed sooner than 30 days prior to the start of the season. So we had a number of people turn their health history updates in July. That's outside the 30-day window. So we have to ask those people to complete a new health history update. We also have to have our athletes have to have a valid physical and complete the New York State School Health Examination form. Good news for the fall 2020 season. As a result of maybe it being difficult to get in for normal yearly physicals, we are accepting a valid physical from the 2018-19 school year and the 2019-20 school year. So both. So within the last 2 calendar years, physicals within the last 2 calendar years are okay. So when you have those forms completed, they can be dropped off at school or scanned and emailed to one of our nurses. 7th and 8th grade students, please send these to Beth Ford at that email address. 9th through 12th graders can send them to Amanda Vogel or Andrea Vink at that email address. I'll just leave this up here for just a couple of seconds if people are at home or taking notes, but just a reminder, I am taping this, and all of this information is available on our athletics website. So I know some of our coaches, if not all of our coaches, have been in touch with athletes that have signed up for sports or should have been in touch. And if they haven't, they will be in touch shortly with details about next week. But I wanted to give you a snapshot of what next week will look like. And I'll leave this up for a little bit. But boys varsity and JV soccer will be meeting together at Snyder Field at the high school. 4:45 to 6:15 will be tryouts Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Next week, girls varsity soccer will meet the same time, also at the high school, all week long, but they'll be at the JV field. Boys modified soccer, our 8th graders are going to start first for boys mod soccer. They're going to go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at the high school. They'll also start up at Snyder Field, and that's going to run 4:45 to 6:15. 7th graders, Coach Sanchez will come down to see the 7th graders starting Thursday and Friday of next week at Farnsworth from 4:45 to 6:15. Girls mod soccer are going to operate kind of on an opposite schedule. So Coach Gula is going to see the kids, the 7th graders, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week at Farnsworth from 4:45 to 6:15, and is going to come see the 8th graders on Thursday and Friday at the high school from 4:45 to 6:15. Varsity and JV field hockey are going to practice 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock at Aframs, and that's all week long. Modified is going to start, but not until Wednesday, the 23rd, and they're also going to go 5 to 7 at Aframs. Tennis will be 4:30 to 6 at our tennis courts. Girls varsity cross country and boys varsity cross country will be 4:45 to 6:15 at the track at the high school. 8th grade boys and girls cross country will also meet with Coach Haig at the high school track from 4:45 to 6:15. 7th grade boys and girls cross country will meet at Farnsworth with Coach Tomel from 4:40 to 5:50 next week. Golf has tryouts Monday, Wednesday, Friday at Western Turnpike starting at 5 o'clock. And girls swimming will have practice 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock at Voorheesville High School. Here's the varsity coaches' contact information I will leave up for just a few moments. If you have sports-specific questions, I would certainly recommend reaching out to your varsity coach, who can hopefully point you in the right direction and answer your question for you. I will make sure that like I said, this presentation is going to be up on the website by tomorrow. So if you are slow to get the pen and the piece of paper, it will be available, and you can also reach out to me and I'll provide it for you. So I want to kind of run through some quick questions that I think are popular questions, and maybe we'll answer some of your questions. And then we'll get to the chat where some of you have been starting to enter questions. And so we'll start with, when will the sports schedules be available online? And I mentioned earlier that schedules are going to look different. We're starting later, and it's going to look different. And we don't have a full slate of games. Field hockey's got 12 varsity and 12 JV games on their schedule. Cross country has 7 meets on their schedule. Golf has 12 matches for varsity and 8 for JV on their schedule. Swimming has 6 meets on their schedule. Soccer has 13 varsity games, 11 JV games on their schedule. Tennis, 13 varsity matches and 8 JV matches. So they're going to look different. But the schedules are done. They're just being approved by each school, as each school has to make some changes and some tweaks. Schools have different end times, different transportation needs. I expect us to have these schedules available to the public by Monday of next week. So that should answer that question. Can an athlete play in all 4 seasons in 2020, 2021? And of course, I'm talking about, now that we've moved high-risk sports to March 1st, we technically have what we're calling the Fall 1 season, which starts next week, the winter season, which starts November 30th, the Fall 2 season, which starts March 1st, and the spring season, which starts April 19th. So theoretically, the answer to this question is yes. An athlete could play in 4 different seasons in 2020, 2021. That does not mean they can play football and play volleyball in Fall 2, because that's the same season. But they can play in 4 separate seasons. So we've already started to see some football, volleyball, and cheerleaders signing up for fall sports next week, which is great, because they certainly have the option to do that. If I'm a student who has elected for full remote instruction, am I eligible to participate in athletics in 2020, 2021? The answer to that is yes. Our fully remote students are bona fide students, so they are able to participate in athletics. I will say this: transportation is a logistical hurdle, this fall, and probably will be for the entire school year. So we cannot provide transportation to our fully remote students to school for practices or for away games. We can't get them to school. So they're going to have to provide their own transportation to practices and to the school for games. They don't necessarily have to provide transportation to away games, although they could if they'd like. They just have to get to school, and then we can provide a bus for them to our away games. But the answer to that question is yes. Fully remote students are eligible to participate. How many practices am I required to participate in before being eligible to participate in games? Those guidelines have been tweaked. We kind of recognize that the likelihood of a full off-season program, participation in a full off-season program, is low. I think our kids are going to need some practice time before they jump right into competitions. So the answer to this question is 10 practices. The team has to run 10 practices, and individually they have to make and participate in 10 practices before they're eligible to participate in their first game. Will there be league championships this fall for varsity suburban council athletics? We are still talking about that. We're talking about the possibility of doing culminating events for the league sports, but we will see. It makes it very difficult when you talk about culminating events in sports like cross country and swimming, which are going to require, and golf, which will require, kids coming from multiple schools, spectators coming from multiple schools. So it's going to be difficult. And also our timeline of our schedule. We're going to have soccer playing until middle of November. We're going to have golf and tennis playing till just about Halloween. So stay tuned on that. It may be difficult. We're focused on providing our kids with an experience and a competitive experience. And I think when you see your schedules, you'll notice that we've done that, given the parameters that we have in front of us. Will there be sectionals this fall? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is no for varsity sports. NISFA and Section 2 announced that we are not doing sectionals this fall. That lengthens the season that we're able to give our kids games in league competition. And obviously, from a management standpoint, sectionals would be hard to pull off given our guidelines. Will there be games scheduled on weekdays this fall, and how will that impact the school day? Well, we got creative with the schedule, and we came up with rotations so that we really only have one, maybe two teams playing on a given day. So the answer to this question is yes, teams will be playing on weekdays, but we also are utilizing Saturdays. And all sports are going to be utilizing Saturdays. And that helps our transportation. That helps from a school standpoint where we're not worried about the 4:30 end time. So we're utilizing weekends, we're utilizing Saturdays, but we are going to have weekday games. And it may require, and it will require, as you can imagine with the fight for daylight as we get into October, some of these games have to get off at a certain time on the weekdays. So we're going to have to dismiss our kids early from school. And I have talked this through our district office team. We have their support. We will make it work to give our kids an experience and to give our kids something. And we have to be able to play during the week. I will say we will get creative when we can be. We are going to line our football field, which has lights, so that we have the ability to play soccer games at 5 o'clock and at 7 o'clock as we get later into the season. So we will get creative when we can, but we are going to have games during the week. There's no doubt about it. What if I can't get a ride to an away game with my parent or with another parent? No worries. As I said earlier, this is an option, and it's an option that we're leaning on this year for parents to help out, but we're not requiring it. We will have the option for any athlete that cannot be transported on their own to an away game to take a school bus. So no worries if you cannot find a ride with a parent or another parent. Will there be shuttle buses to practices at Western Turnpike, Voorheesville High School, Aframs, and Towasenta? Stay tuned. Right now, I'm telling our coaches to be under the assumption that we don't have shuttles. We have school being dismissed at 4:30. It is a crazy time. That is a hard time for us to ask for shuttles for athletics. So this is where we're certainly going to have to lean on help from parents. So stay tuned on the shuttle buses. But as it stands right now, we are starting next week with the understanding that we may not have shuttle buses for practices. Will athletes have access to the locker rooms? Yes. We are asking our athletes that can come to school or come to practice already prepared, to please do so. So we limit locker room access, but we know we're going to have to provide locker rooms, and we will do so safely. We will do so with a schedule for practices and a schedule for games. We will tape out social distancing in the locker rooms. We will cap out maximum occupancy in the locker rooms. And we will have coaches manning those doors, and we'll make sure those areas are cleaned, periodically. So they will have access. We talked about this earlier. What if my son or daughter cannot tolerate wearing a mask during physical activity for medical reasons? And that could be the case, and we're certainly not turning those cases away. They're going to have to provide documentation from their physician, and then that will have to be approved by our school physician. And everyone else is going to have to be masked up. And in practices, when we are spaced out, and we can be spaced out, our coaches will instruct our kids to take the masks off. But during competition, right now the answer is we are masked up. All right, that is just the easiest way to enforce it. That's the easiest way to make sure we're safe. We're going to coach our kids to let us know and know what to do when they're having difficulties. But I think we're going to have to train the kids. It's different. It's something that's new. It's uncomfortable. We're going to have to start training the kids to do that. And we're going to start next week in practice. What if I forget my mask for a practice or a game, or if my mask is damaged? Our coaches have been supplied with PPE, including masks. So we are asking kids bring their own masks, but if they don't have them, we will have them for them. Will football, cheerleading, and volleyball be allowed to conduct off-season workouts on campus? We just got guidance that does clear this to happen. But right now, I've told our coaches in those sports that we are trying to get our low and moderate risk sports up off the ground next week. And we will get to what we can do for our high-risk sports on campus next week. We'll start to have those conversations. Where do I go for the most up-to-date news on Guilderland athletics? Go to our Twitter page at GoDutchAthletics, where we are constantly providing updates, news articles, pictures, recaps. anything you could think of. So at this time, I am done with my presentation, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. All right, so we are at a point where we're about wrapping up. I know I haven't had a chance to look at the chat box, and I know Kate has been looking at that. It looks like we have a question about locker room use, and I just answered that question. We are going to provide locker room access to our athletes. Of course, we're going to be encouraging them to come to practice prepared, especially the kids who are remote. They're going to have an easier opportunity to do that. So we are asking them to come prepared, but we also understand that kids aren't always going to be prepared, especially the kids that are at school and going through their school day. So we will make sure that that's available. The Twitter address again is at Go Dutch Athletics. That's at GO. I'll put this right in the chat. How's that? I'll try to put it in the chat. There's our Twitter account. Are 7th and 8th graders eligible to try out for JV and varsity sports? Great question. And the answer is yes. There is a process called the Advanced Athletic Placement Process that is, essentially has been set up by New York State Education Department. So that's not new. That's something we've always done, the APP process. That's initiated by a coach's invite. Because the point of the APP process is it's for the select few. It's not for anyone. It's for the select few because we've got 7th and 8th graders who could potentially be coming up and competing with older students. And there's safety concerns, there's social concerns, academic concerns. So, it starts with a coach's invite. So the APP process has already been administered for the fall season. With a start date of Monday, we couldn't afford to delay that. It does require us sending out information to the invited athletes, required maturity tests with our school physician, and school fitness, required fitness tests. So we've had fitness tests the last couple of days. That's already been administered, unfortunately. And I will say, we've got to have to move forward, unfortunately, with our APP process the way it is. And I know some of the suburban council schools have decided to do against the APP process this year because of just from a management standpoint. You can imagine when they're not offering modified sports, the number of kids who would be interested in APPing up to JV from a management standpoint would be very, very difficult. So we decided to keep with the APP, but we aren't going to venture off what the purpose of the APP is, even though our modified experience is not going to be here. Mute that. Thank you. So we've gone through that process, unfortunately. So when will parents hear from the coach with more details? So I'm gonna do another round of communication to our coaches. They have directories from signups that were done back in June. They have parent and student directories, and also directories from their sign up with our nurse. So our coaches should be in touch. If they haven't already been in touch, they should be in touch shortly. But I will certainly remind them to do that because we're starting next week, and I don't want our athletes and parents to be confused about where we're going and when we're going. So we will circle back to that. Off-season workouts for volleyball in the next few weeks. The guidance that we just got from NISFA that is updated is going to allow for that. So that's just something we're gonna have to stay tuned on. We're trying to get the low and moderate risk sports up and off the ground first. So we will stay tuned on the off-season workouts for volleyball, cheer, and football. We do have guidance that will allow it, but we're trying to get the low and moderate risk sports off the ground right now. So I don't want to keep you too long. We're right at about the 45-minute mark, which I kind of thought this was going to take about 30 to 45 minutes. So I'm just going to wrap up. If there's a question that comes up that I didn't have a chance to answer, please email me, and I'm going to put my email in the chat right now. I'm doing that. Also on our athletic webpage. So if I wasn't able to answer question, feel free to reach out. I know we're only a few days away. Please mute. Thank you. So yeah, only a few days. I guess I'll close with this. I'm just going to reiterate how excited I am that we have this opportunity. I'm sure we're excited. We're nervous at the same time. It's a combination of the two. But we've had a lot of conversations with our district office team. We've had a lot of conversations with our coaches. And as I've shared with you our plan tonight, a little bit of our plan tonight, I feel really good about our plan, and I feel like we can do this safely. But we need everybody to do their part. And that's the message that's going to be loud and clear from coaches to athletes and from coaches to athletes and parents. And I'm going to make my visits to all of our teams within the first 2-3 days and introduce myself and reiterate that message. We cannot get too comfortable. If we get too comfortable, and let our guard down, this may not work, and we have an opportunity as a fall program to set the stage for our winter athletes, our fall 2 athletes, and our spring athletes. And I want this opportunity to stay there for our kids. And in order for it to stay there, we need to all do our part. So that's the message I really want to leave with everybody. Is there risk involved? Certainly. I can't tell anybody right now that there isn't risk involved. I can't tell you that for sure. But I feel good about our plan. We're going to need everyone's help with screening, with masks, with spectators, with transportation. I'm confident our plan. I'm confident our athletes, our coaches, our parents. And I look forward to seeing everybody in action. And I do see a question before I leave. Please mute so we can finish this. Thank you. Why no 9th grade sports? So the only level that we're not offering this fall is Mod 9 and freshman sports. That doesn't necessarily mean that 9th graders don't have an option to participate. They do. It's just that this year, with the tall task at hand, with the transportation concerns, the number of kids the number of kids on campus, the lack of games that we would have available to schedule our Mod 9 and freshman teams, because nobody else in our conference is doing Mod 9 and freshman. It just was a combination of those factors that led us to let's focus on varsity, JV, and modified. Our 9th graders still have the opportunity. They're going to have to go out for the JV team as opposed to a Mod 9 or freshman soccer team. So as much as I would love to offer all levels, as you can imagine, going through this presentation tonight, we have a very difficult task. And, it makes it a little bit more manageable for a variety of reasons to focus on Mod, JV, and varsity this fall. So that's, I hope, answering your question. I'm happy to report that we are going to return those levels next fall. This is just a one-time thing. So I'll leave you guys now. I look forward to watching everybody in action. I look forward to meeting everybody. I'm confident we're going to make this work, and I'm so excited for our athletes. I think getting back into school is needed, but getting our kids back on the playing field, I'm super excited. So go Dutchman! It's great to have an opportunity to chat with everybody tonight. And if you know of somebody that didn't have an opportunity to watch tonight, please let them know. I'm going to put the recording up on the website. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Okay. No! I didn't get it. Oh my god!